They said, "Don't go near her." But the alien queen chose to sit beside me instead. The space station hung like a silver jewel above the swirling blues and greens of the Lyrathi homeworld. It was enormous, a structure built not for war but for observation, learning, and diplomacy. Humans had only recently made contact with the Lyrathi, a species that towered above any human in height, and moved with a quiet grace that seemed almost unreal. Their eyes shimmered like liquid crystal, and their thoughts often spoke louder than their words. Elias had never been anywhere like this before. He had spent most of his life in human spaceports on Earth, reading old texts about alien civilizations and imagining what first contact might feel like. But nothing in his studies had prepared him for the reality of the Lyrathi. Every surface reflected light in soft colors. Every corridor hummed with energy that seemed alive, and every being he saw carried an air of calm authority. "Do not go near her," the human ambassador had warned him repeatedly before the assembly. "The queen is selective. Many have tried. Many have failed." Elias nodded, trying to hide the nervous flutter in his chest. He had been warned, carefully instructed and briefed to maintain a strict distance. The queen of the Lyrathi was not just a leader. She was a living repository of knowledge, an entity whose presence could overwhelm the unprepared mind. Humans were advised to approach only when invited, never uninvited. But the moment Elias stepped into the Grand Assembly Hall, all the warnings came back to him in a different way. The room was vast, circular, with lights that shifted color like liquid rainbows across the walls. The Lyrathi gathered in concentric rings around the center, their long limbs folding elegantly, their expressions serene yet calculating. And there, at the very heart, sat her, the queen. She was taller than any Lyrathi he had seen, her body moving with a fluid elegance that seemed to make the air shimmer around her. Her eyes, a deep, mesmerizing silver, scanned the room slowly, and then they landed on him. The world seemed to hush. Humans around him murmured uneasily, shifting on their feet. Lyrathi advisors stiffened. Even the lights seemed to dim for a moment. And then, impossibly, she rose. Elias froze. Every warning flashed in his mind. Do not approach her. She chooses carefully. Yet she was moving toward him, not in a rush, not in a threatening way, but in a deliberate, graceful glide that made his heart pound in his chest. When she reached the row where he stood, she paused, tilting her head as though examining him, studying not his appearance, but something deeper. And then, without a word, she sat down beside him. The humans gasped silently. No one had ever dared approach her before, and now she had chosen him. Elias swallowed hard. His mind raced. Should he stand? Bow? Speak? The queen didn't seem to mind his hesitation. Instead, she regarded him with calm interest, and for a moment, the noise of the assembly faded into nothing. Then, as if speaking only to him, a single word echoed in his mind. "Tell me your story." Startled, he looked around, thinking someone had spoken, but the room remained silent. His pulse raced. Could it be? Telepathy? The queen was communicating directly with him. I'm Elias," he said softly, almost to himself. "I'm a human liaison, a translator. I help humans understand, alien cultures." His words felt awkward, inadequate. The queen didn't seem offended. Her eyes reflected a quiet patience, almost amusement. The assembly continued around them, but it felt distant, like it belonged to another world. Every movement, every glance, every whisper seemed to be happening somewhere else, far from this quiet bubble of attention the queen had created by sitting beside him. A Lyrathi advisor stepped closer, his voice soft, melodic, and slightly dissonant to human ears. "She chooses unusual companions," he said carefully, more to the humans than to Elias. "It is not uncommon for other species to fail. You must be cautious." Elias nodded, not taking his eyes off the queen. She tilted her head again, and this time he thought he saw a flicker of what humans might call curiosity. He felt it in his chest, like a gentle vibration. She wanted to know him. Minutes passed like hours. Elias struggled to find words that could reach her, and then he remembered the stories he had brought, a small digital device filled with human art, music, and short cultural tales. He hesitated, then gently held it out. The queen's fingers hovered above the device, not touching, not commanding, but exploring with her presence. He felt another gentle pulse in his mind, a signal of interest, almost excitement. I brought stories, he said, his voice steadier now. Music, paintings, things humans do. He smiled nervously. I thought maybe you'd like them. The queen's gaze lingered on the device. Then, slowly, she reached out, not with her hand, but with a kind of mental extension, touching the images, the sounds, the colors, and the emotions they contained. Elias felt his chest tighten. He was sharing his world, and she was experiencing it in a way no one else could. Around them, whispers grew. Humans speculated. Lyra the observers exchanged subtle signals, and ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one had seen this before. Humans were not considered particularly elegant, patient, or telepathically perceptive. Yet here he was, a mere human, sitting beside the queen of an ancient, intelligent species, sharing culture directly with her mind. Tell me about your planet. The queen's thought finally reached him. Clear and precise. Her tone was not demanding. It was curious, gentle, inviting. Elias swallowed, then began. Earth is complicated. We have oceans and mountains, forests and deserts. We have cities with lights that never sleep, and small villages where people still rely on each other in old ways. Our languages are many. Our music is chaotic, and our stories. We love stories. The queen listened, truly listened, as Elias described humanity's art, its humor, its mistakes, and its triumphs. She seemed to soak in every detail, absorbing it not just with understanding, but with appreciation. And humor? She asked, again in his mind. Humans find humor in absurdity? Yes, Elias said, smiling. We laugh at things that make no sense. Sometimes it helps us survive, even when the world is difficult. A quiet ripple of amusement pulsed from the queen, and Elias felt it like warmth along his spine. For a moment he allowed himself to marvel. Here was a being who could read minds, who had seen centuries of life, who could have dismissed humans as insignificant, but she did not. She chose to sit beside him. The assembly began to wind down. Delegates rose, exchanged formalities, and began leaving. Yet the queen remained beside Elias. She seemed unconcerned with protocol, uninterested in appearances, focused only on him. A final warning echoed from the human ambassador, a quiet hiss in Elias's ear. Do not overstep. Remember who you are. But Elias ignored it. There was no fear in her presence. There was only curiosity, understanding, and a silent invitation to connect. As the crowd dispersed, the queen's attention remained on him. A faint, almost imperceptible hum filled the room, a vibration of thought and emotion. Elias realized that he was not just speaking to her, he was being heard in a way he had never known. Tomorrow, her thought finally reached him, soft and echoing, bring your stories again. Show me more. Elias nodded, even though she could see it. I will, he said, his voice steadier now, confident. A smile spread across his face. It was not arrogance. It was a spark of human pride, small but real. Humans were fragile, limited, and chaotic. But here, with the queen choosing him, they were understood. The queen finally stood, her movement as fluid and unearthly as before. She left him a mental impression, a gentle echo of amusement and encouragement, and returned to her throne. Elias watched her go, his mind racing. Others might see just a giant, elegant alien sitting beside him. But he knew something different. She had chosen him. And in that choice lay a bridge, not of power, but of trust. As the doors of the assembly closed behind the last of the delegates, Elias allowed himself one deep breath. His chest still raced, his hands still shook slightly. but he felt alive in a way he never had before. Humanity had been warned, told to stay away, told to fear. Yet here he was, chosen by a being centuries older than the human race, invited to share stories, to communicate, to connect. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns, and dangerous in ways he could not yet imagine. But for the first time, Elias felt that humans were not just visitors. They were participants. And tomorrow he would bring his stories again. The day after the assembly, Elias woke early, his mind buzzing with anticipation. The memory of the Queen sitting beside him replayed over and over, like a story he could not stop telling himself. He had spent the night arranging a small collection of human stories, art, and music on a portable device, carefully selecting examples that might appeal to her. He arrived at the observation hall, a high-ceilinged chamber that overlooked the swirling clouds and oceans of the Lirathi homeworld. The sunlight, or what passed for sunlight here, glinted through translucent panels, casting colorful patterns across the polished floor. Elias's heart raced as he saw her waiting, already seated in her usual calm posture. She was taller than any human he had ever imagined, yet there was something comforting about the way she sat, as though she belonged to the universe in a way humans could only dream of. "You have returned," her voice, or rather her thought, echoed in his mind. It was soft, inviting, curious. Elias swallowed, trying to steady himself. "Yes," he said aloud, holding the device carefully.
"I brought more stories, more music." "More paintings?"
He hesitated. "I hope you like them." Her gaze, deep and crystalline, softened. A gentle pulse brushed against his thoughts. Anticipation, amusement, curiosity. It was not just interest. It was a desire to understand, something Elias had never felt so clearly from any being before. He activated the device, and a soft melody filled the chamber. It was human music, chaotic and full of emotion, shifting from gentle strings to percussion that made the floor vibrate faintly. The Queen leaned forward slightly, absorbing not only the sound but the feelings embedded in it. Elias felt a faint echo of her response in his mind. Joy, confusion, wonder, and something close to laughter. "You humans are strange," she thought. "Your creations are alive in ways I cannot predict."
Elias smiled. "That's what we hope for. Our art, it is messy sometimes, but it's honest."
"We try to make sense of the world through it."
She tilted her head.
A subtle shimmer of light passed through her eyes like sunlight refracting through crystal. "Tell me of your humor," she said. "How do you find meaning in absurdity?" Elias laughed softly, feeling more at ease than he had expected. "We make jokes about things that don't make sense. About mistakes, about surprises. Sometimes we even laugh at ourselves. Humor helps us survive." The Queen's pulse in his mind shifted again, closer to amusement. He realized he was starting to understand her language, not as words but as feelings and colors, like an emotional spectrum that carried subtle meaning.
Over the next hour, Elias introduced more of his human world.
He showed paintings of mountains and forests, of people dancing and children playing. He played recordings of laughter, of celebrations, of quiet moments of sadness and love. With each new story, each new melody, the Queen responded, not just with attention but with emotion. She seemed to experience each piece fully, letting the human experience resonate within her ancient mind. "You understand your world through connection," she said in thought. "You see small moments, and they build into something larger." "Yes," Elias agreed. "We learn from each other, from what we see, from what we feel. Even mistakes teach us something." The connection between them was growing, a silent understanding that required no translation. Around them, the Lirathi observation decks buzzed with activity, but Elias felt as if they were in a small bubble, a place outside time and protocol. Yet, curiosity alone was not enough. That afternoon, Elias was summoned to a meeting with the human ambassador and a small council of Lirathi advisors. A minor incident had arisen, an unintentional breach of protocol that could embarrass humanity before the Lirathi Council. "Elias," said Ambassador Hark,
This is delicate. A misunderstanding in the cultural translation of greetings has caused tension among the Lyrothi factions.
You may be the only human capable of resolving this. Elias nodded, though his chest tightened.
I'll try. I think I can help. The council chamber was a different world from the observation hall.
It was circular, with a high vaulted ceiling that reflected the soft hues of the planet below. Lyrathi delegates sat around the perimeter, their expressions unreadable. Humans took a small section on one side, stiff and anxious. The queen was present but remained silent, seated at the center as all eyes watched her. Elias approached, carefully holding his device. He explained the situation in simple, clear words, translating the human intentions behind the greetings, the gestures, the subtle meanings that had been lost. The delegates listened, tilting their heads, sending faint pulses that Elias began to interpret as curiosity and skepticism. He paused, then spoke from the heart. Humans do not always get things right, he said. We make mistakes, but when we do, we try to fix them. We learn. That is how we connect with each other. And with you. The queen shifted slightly, sending a gentle, approving wave through his mind. Her attention was fully on him, as if lending him a calm authority he did not possess on his own. Elias felt a surge of confidence. Your customs are subtle, he continued. We did not understand.
But now we do, and we are willing to adapt.
Not because we are forced, but because we want to understand you. A long silence followed. Then, one by one, the delegates began to emit soft pulses. Approval, respect, acknowledgement. The crisis eased not with confrontation, not with power, but with honesty, clarity, and human empathy. Elias felt a small thrill of pride. Humanity had been warned to stay away, to fear, to respect the alien hierarchy. Yet here they were, earning trust through communication, not coercion. When the meeting ended, the queen rose and approached him once more. She leaned slightly closer, sending a thought that Elias felt in the very marrow of his bones. You surprise me. Humans are capable.
Elias felt warmth spread across him, a mix of pride, relief, and wonder.
He realized that this was something more than diplomatic success. This was a human moment, a triumph not of strength, but of ingenuity, empathy, and courage. In the days that followed, Elias continued his sessions with the queen. Each day he brought new stories, new music, new insights into human life. She began to share visions in return, not in words, but in feelings, colors, and abstract impressions of her own world. Elias could feel the memory of centuries, the pulse of generations of Lyrathi knowledge. Through these sessions, he learned the subtle beauty of alien perception. The queen taught him to sense patterns in emotion, to notice small but meaningful details, and to appreciate the depth of thought that underpinned Lyrathi society. And, in return, she learned about human resilience, creativity, humor, and the value of small, imperfect efforts. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the planet, she asked him, "Why do you persist, human? Why do you continue despite fear, despite doubt?" Elias thought for a moment, looking at the silver glow of the moons reflected in her eyes. "Because," he said slowly, "we hope. We always hope. And sometimes hope is enough to build bridges, to change minds, to connect worlds."
A pulse of acknowledgement passed through her mind. For the first time, Elias felt something like a smile in her thoughts, an alien expression of approval and curiosity.
But not everyone was pleased. Rumors began to spread among the human delegates. Why her? Why him? Some whispered that Elias was overstepping, that he risked the fragile human-Lyrathi relationship. Others, however, noticed that the queen had never looked so engaged with a human, never allowed one to participate so openly in her private councils. Elias ignored the whispers. He knew the queen had chosen him not because of rank or power, but because he represented something uniquely human: curiosity, patience, empathy, and courage. She saw the best of humanity, and he was determined not to disappoint her. One morning, an unexpected message arrived. The queen invited him to attend a private council session. Elias could hardly believe it. No human had ever been allowed inside her inner circle. This was unprecedented, and it terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. The journey to the council chamber was silent and tense. The advisors watched him with careful curiosity, their thoughts brushing against his mind like soft wind. He could feel their skepticism, their caution, but he also felt the queen's steady guidance, a quiet reassurance that he was exactly where he needed to be. When they arrived, the chamber was vast, filled with delegates from other star systems. Elias felt like a small, fragile creature in the midst of giants, but the queen's presence beside him made him feel grounded, capable, and part of something larger. She leaned toward him, a pulse of thought brushing against his mind. Observe, learn, and speak when you must. Your perspective is valuable. Elias nodded, swallowing his fear. He realized that humanity's role in the galaxy was not to dominate, but to connect, to understand, and to inspire. He would carry this truth into the council session, into every story he told, and into every interaction he had with the queen. And for the first time, he understood something profound. Sometimes being human was enough. Being curious, hopeful, and willing to reach across the unknown could achieve more than armies, weapons, or rules ever could. As the council session began, Elias felt the eyes of countless delegates upon him. The queen's presence beside him was a silent shield, a reminder that trust could outweigh fear, and understanding could outweigh misunderstanding. And in that moment, Elias knew that the galaxy was watching, and that humans were no longer invisible. Elias stepped into the council chamber with a mix of awe and nerves. The room was enormous, a circle of polished silver and glowing crystal panels that reflected the twin moons outside. Delegates from countless species filled the seats, their forms diverse and unfamiliar. Each one radiated intelligence and curiosity, yet he could feel their doubt brushing against him like a cold wind. He looked to his side. The queen of the Lirathi sat with a calm authority that had always both terrified and reassured him. Her gaze met his, and he felt a subtle pulse of encouragement, a quiet push. You belong here. Observe. Listen. Learn. No human had ever been allowed in this chamber before. Elias knew the stakes. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made, could influence humanity's reputation among countless civilizations. But instead of fear, he felt something stronger: purpose. Humans were underestimated in the galaxy, and this was his chance to show that ingenuity, empathy, and creativity mattered more than sheer power. The session began. Delegates spoke in overlapping tones, exchanging thoughts and visions, sharing complex information about trade disputes, interstellar navigation, and resource allocations. The language of the council was intricate, full of nuances that no human could normally parse.
Elias focused on the queen, reading the subtle pulses she emitted and letting them guide him.
At first he remained silent, observing, interpreting, and learning. He noticed patterns other delegates overlooked: a hesitation in one species' tone, a subtle inconsistency in another's description, a detail no one else seemed to notice. The queen's pulse in his mind strengthened whenever he caught something important, like a teacher nudging a student toward understanding. Then, a dispute arose, a disagreement about a resource-sharing agreement that could affect multiple star systems. The delegates argued passionately, and the discussion threatened to spiral into confusion and mistrust. Elias took a deep breath. He could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken fears, the impatience. He remembered what the queen had taught him: observe first, connect second, and when the time is right, speak with clarity and honesty. He raised his hand, a simple gesture, but one that drew attention. A ripple of surprise moved through the council. A human had never interjected before. Some delegates tilted their heads in curiosity, others in skepticism. "I may not share your history or your language," Elias began, his voice steady, "but I can see the problem clearly. You all want fairness, yes? And yet the discussion has become confusing. Perhaps we can look at the details together, step by step." He paused. letting the words sink in. The queen's presence beside him strengthened his confidence, not by fear, but by quiet support. He continued, pointing to the devices and charts projected before them. Here, you see the quantities and needs. If we approach this logically, while respecting everyone's priorities, we can reach a solution that benefits all parties. A delegate from a winged species tilted its head, its thought brushing against Elias's mind. Can a human truly comprehend this? Elias felt the subtle challenge, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he focused on what humans did best, seeing connections others missed, understanding people, or beings, through empathy, and finding creative ways to solve problems. Slowly, he guided the council through a step-by-step analysis. He highlighted overlaps in needs, suggested compromises based on shared goals, and introduced perspectives they might have ignored. All the while, the Queen's pulse reinforced his points, subtly signaling when he had touched on something important. Minutes passed, and the atmosphere began to shift. Skepticism turned into interest. Confusion gave way to understanding. By the time Elias finished, the council was leaning toward agreement, not because anyone was forced, but because they could see the solution clearly. The Queen turned to him, and he felt the warmth of her approval pulse through his mind. You see beyond what is obvious. Humans have insight. Elias smiled, relieved but also exhilarated. He realized that humanity had a power the galaxy often overlooked. The ability to connect, to notice, to think creatively, and to approach problems with empathy rather than force. The day continued. Delegates consulted him, asking questions they might have ignored from others. Elias shared stories of human problem-solving, of diplomacy, of small yet meaningful acts that changed outcomes. He told them of humans' art, humor, and music, not as decoration, but as tools for understanding emotion and motivation. He noticed subtle shifts in the room. Delegates began to respond to his human perspective, integrating it into their own deliberations. Ideas that had seemed impossible now appeared achievable. Conflicts softened, not through intimidation, but through clarity, understanding, and cooperation. During a break, one of the younger Lyrithi delegates approached him. Her crystal-like eyes shimmered with curiosity. You are different, she said, her thought brushing against his mind. You think in ways we do not. You are not bound by centuries of protocol. You innovate. Elias laughed softly. We try to, he said. Sometimes we fail spectacularly. But we keep trying. That is our way.
She tilted her head. It is
remarkable. I have never seen our queen so engaged. She values your insights. Unusually so. Yes, Elias admitted, and I am learning more than I ever imagined. When the council reconvened, the Queen spoke briefly, her voice resonant and clear. She praised the delegates for their willingness to adapt, but she also singled out Elias. This human, she said, sees patterns where others see only confusion. His perspective is valuable. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned toward him. Some humans in the room gasped. The delegates exchanged subtle pulses of surprise. Elias felt a strange mix of pride and humility. He had never sought recognition, only understanding. Yet here it was, a quiet acknowledgement from the most powerful being he had ever encountered. As the council session ended, Elias was escorted to the observation balcony with the Queen. Outside, the twin moons reflected on the planet's oceans, casting silver paths across the shimmering waves. He felt the hum of the planet beneath him, and the quiet weight of centuries of alien wisdom beside him. Do you understand now why I chose you? The Queen asked, her thought gentle, inquisitive. Elias thought for a moment. Because I try to see the world clearly and connect with it honestly? A pulse of acknowledgement passed through her mind.
Yes.
You do not dominate. You do not demand. You observe, you empathize, you create bridges where others see walls. That is human strength. Elias felt warmth flood through him. All his life, humans had been underestimated, seen as fragile, emotional, chaotic. But here, with the Queen's recognition, he realized that those qualities were not weaknesses. They were tools. They were what made humans valuable, what made them capable of reaching across worlds, across species, and across centuries of tradition. Over the next days, Elias continued his work with the Queen. She introduced him to more subtle aspects of Larathy thought, how they perceived time as fluid, how they communicated emotions not just as feelings, but as layered patterns of meaning, how they resolved conflicts through shared understanding rather than force. Elias adapted quickly, bringing human insights into these lessons. He taught her about human empathy in practical terms, the value of listening without judging, the power of small gestures, the creativity born from imperfection. The Queen responded with fascination, delight, and occasionally gentle surprise at the unpredictability of humans. One evening, as the chamber lights dimmed and the moons cast their glow, the Queen turned to Elias. "You are changing the way we think," she said, "and perhaps the way we see your species." Elias felt a swell of pride. But he also felt the weight of responsibility. Humans had a chance, through him, to show the galaxy that they were more than just fragile creatures. They could inspire, connect, and innovate in ways that even the oldest civilizations had not anticipated. He realized something important. Trust was not given lightly, but once it was earned, it carried immense power. The Queen's trust in him was not just a personal gift, it was a signal to the galaxy that humans could be allies, partners, and innovators. That night, Elias sat alone on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. He thought of Earth, of his family, of the human race. He thought of the Queen, her calm intelligence, and her curiosity about his world. And he knew with certainty that humans were capable of much more than they or anyone else had ever imagined. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers and mysteries, but Elias no longer felt small. He had a role, a purpose, and the Queen had shown him that even one human, acting with honesty, creativity, and courage, could make a difference in ways that echoed across the stars. And somewhere deep in his mind he felt a quiet pulse of amusement from the Queen. "We are only beginning," it said. The council chamber was brighter than ever, yet charged with tension. Delegates from dozens of star systems gathered, some pacing, some floating in meditation, others exchanging quick pulses of thought. Today was the day a major interstellar treaty would be finalized, an agreement that could ensure cooperation across hundreds of worlds. Elias stood at the edge of the chamber, his portable device in hand, heart steady but mind alert. This was the moment that could define humanity's place in the galaxy. He glanced at the Queen of the Lyrathi seated in her central position, radiating calm authority. Her pulse reached him a gentle encouragement. "You are ready. Trust yourself. Show them what humans can do."
He inhaled deeply.
Humans had been warned about the complexities of alien politics, told to be careful, told not to overstep. Yet here he was, the first human ever allowed this access, entrusted with representing more than his own species, entrusted with bridging entire civilizations. The session began. A delegate from a crystalline species took the floor first, presenting concerns about resource allocations. Others immediately followed, their discussions becoming layered, fast-moving, and intricate. Elias listened, absorbing every nuance. The Queen's pulse in his mind helped him focus, highlighting subtle emotional undercurrents, hidden motivations, and potential solutions. And then, an impasse emerged. One faction, the Nomari, a species of nomadic navigators, insisted on a clause that could have destabilized the treaty. Tensions rose, delegates glared, their mental energies creating a quiet storm of doubt and impatience. The humans watching from the side shifted nervously, unsure what Elias could contribute. He took a deep breath. Now was the time to act. "Excuse me," Elias said aloud, his voice calm but confident. Heads turned. The Queen's gaze met his, and he felt a pulse of permission, a nudge of trust.
"I believe I may offer a perspective you have not considered." A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber.
A human had never spoken at this level. Some delegates exchanged curious glances. Others were skeptical. Elias focused, steadying his mind. "Your concerns are valid," he continued. "The Nomari need security for their trade routes, yes? And other species are worried about fairness in allocations. But if we look at this not as conflict, but as shared opportunity, we can create a solution that respects everyone's needs. He gestured to a series of charts and data projections on the crystalline display. If each species contributes according to their strengths and agreements are based on transparent sharing rather than strict ownership, the resources can benefit all parties. The Nomari receive their roots, others gain access to the materials they need, and no one is excluded.
There was a pause. Delegates absorbed his words, some emitting slow pulses of thought that Elias interpreted as curiosity and hesitation.
Then another, smaller pulse, doubt. Elias pressed on. This requires cooperation and trust. But trust is not given blindly. It is built through understanding and action. Humans have learned this over centuries. We may be fragile, emotional, and chaotic, but we are persistent, creative, and willing to reach across differences to find solutions. The chamber quieted. Delegates considered his words carefully. Elias felt the subtle warmth of the Queen's encouragement pulsing through his mind. You are guiding them. Continue. He described small, practical steps, sharing data transparently, creating joint committees, implementing phased cooperation with clear reporting, and including cultural exchange programs to foster empathy. He spoke plainly without jargon, but with clarity that cut through the complexity of interstellar politics. For the first time, Elias noticed smiles forming, small, subtle, but unmistakable. Skepticism was giving way to possibility. Some delegates leaned forward, some tilted their heads, and the tension began to dissolve. Finally, the leader of the Nomari spoke. Your words are unexpected. We see that this proposal respects our needs and considers the well-being of all. He paused, glancing at Elias with cautious admiration. Perhaps there is wisdom in your approach. The room exhaled. A moment later, other delegates nodded, pulses of agreement spreading like ripples. The treaty, once fragile and in danger of collapse, was now on the path to success, not through force, intimidation, or dominance, but through human ingenuity, empathy, and courage. Elias felt a surge of pride, but also humility. He had never imagined being a voice of reason for so many civilizations at once. And yet, he understood now. Humans were underestimated not because they lacked intelligence, but because others failed to see their ability to connect, to innovate, and to inspire. The Queen turned to him, her silver eyes glowing softly.
You have exceeded expectations. Your perspective has shaped the outcome.
Humans are remarkable. Elias felt warmth flood his chest. He realized that the Queen's choice to sit beside him had been more than a personal decision. It was a bridge between species, a symbol of trust and possibility. Humans were no longer just observers in the galaxy. They were participants, capable of shaping outcomes through clarity, empathy, and action. As the session concluded, the Queen invited Elias to join her on the observation deck. The twin moons cast silver trails across the oceans below, and the planet glimmered like a jewel. Elias leaned on the railing, taking in the sight and feeling the hum of the station beneath him. You have done well, the Queen said, her voice gentle but filled with authority. Your species surprises me. You are persistent, imaginative, and compassionate. These qualities, they can move worlds. Elias smiled. Thank you. I only tried to do what humans do best. We learn, we connect, and we hope. That's all. She tilted her head, her eyes reflecting the moons. Hope. Yes. It is more powerful than many realize. Humans possess it in ways other species do not. You remind me of that. Elias felt a swell of emotion. He thought of Earth, of his family, of every person who had ever doubted that humans could matter on a galactic scale. And now here he was, standing beside the Queen of the Larathi, having helped shape a treaty that could benefit countless civilizations, all through understanding and connection, not violence. Tomorrow, the Queen continued, you will present the final agreement. The delegates will look to you for guidance. Are you ready?
Elias nodded. I am. I will do my best.
That night he stayed on the observation deck, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. Humans had been told to fear the Queen, to respect her distance, to never presume to engage directly. But she had chosen him. She had seen the value in human creativity, empathy, and courage. And through that trust, humanity now had a place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as partners. The next day, Elias stood before the assembled council once more. He presented the treaty, explaining the reasoning, clarifying the steps, and highlighting the shared benefits. Delegates listened, engaged, and ultimately approved the agreement unanimously. The room erupted, not in noise, but in pulses of thought, emotion, and energy that conveyed relief, admiration, and respect. Elias felt the Queen's gentle approval. "You have done well. Humanity is seen." He smiled quietly. Humans had achieved something remarkable, not through weapons, not through threats, not through domination, but through connection, insight, and courage. This was the essence of what made them special. After the council, Elias walked with the Queen along the observation deck. The stars stretched infinitely around them, and the planet below shimmered like liquid glass. "You have changed perceptions," she said. "Humans are no longer underestimated. You have shown what your kind can achieve." Elias looked at her, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. "I hope we can continue to show that humans are capable, that we can make a difference without fighting." She paused, her eyes reflecting the moon's.
Yes, and you will.
"You are only the beginning. Your species has potential beyond what even I imagined." Elias smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt that humans truly mattered in the galaxy. They were not the strongest, they were not the most ancient, but they were curious, persistent, and capable of bridging worlds. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. As they stood side by side watching the galaxy stretch into infinity, Elias felt a quiet pulse of connection between him and the Queen, between humans and the Lyrathi, and between countless species that had just begun to see one another in a new light. And in that moment he knew humanity's story in the stars was only beginning.